having some order in our day gives us predictability, and there's a lot of things that we can't control during the day. We don't know often how our clients are going to receive our work. We don't know what email is going to come in. We don't know what fire we're going to have to put out, or what emergency there will be, or even what the weather will be on Thursday. So these things that we can't control are made more manageable, or we can stomach them better when the things we can't control are in order. Hey guys, it's me. My name's Tom Prose, and this is where I answer your questions about illustration. Happy Monday. I hope you guys are sinking into your work weeks nicely. I hope that you're having a nice quiet morning, sipping your coffee. Enjoying the stillness of the morning, and that it's not too hectic. I hope that your email account is not full of unwanted emails, but lots of great new jobs and lots of positive feedback from your clients and lots of approvals. And I hope your banks are just being flooded with cash from your high-paying clients. Probably not. But hey, we get to draw for a living. And while it is quiet around here, you might notice that my studio is a little bit sparse. I have my humble map of Canada up. That's my decoration right now. I have my guitar. Well, actually, it's my wife's guitar. And she actually, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but that's my guitar on the wall. My wife designed the thing that it's hanging on, and my friend Jeremy put it together. And anyway, yeah, my studio is a bit sparse because I'm in the transition of moving my studio from here I'm on a kind of a farm property. It used to be a hog farm, and now I share this kind of building with a bunch of potters, guys who make ceramics. And yeah, I find it pretty dusty here. It's been really good. I love it here, but it's kind of bare bones, and I've been renting, and we're moving the studio to my house. So I haven't been ready to move my studio to the house since I've started illustrating, because it's very distracting when your kids are home and there's domestic duties beckoning to you while you're trying to concentrate. But at this stage in my career and in my life and as a father, I feel like it's important to be around the house more. And I do work so much that I do miss out on being around when my kids are around. And so I've decided to just move the studio to my house and just go for it. And we'll set up some kind of system to make it work. And the idea is that, like, when I'm, when you're illustrating during the day, you're working during the day, and you've just done everything you can, and you can't focus anymore. And so what do? You go and distract yourself. You might go on YouTube or go for a walk. Well, I can then take a break and hang out with my kids, or do some gardening around the house, or whatever else needs doing around the house. It just seems like a good time in my life to be home more and have the studio in the house, where I can just include my family more in my work life. And we're going to see how that goes. Anyway, I'm really excited. We hired some actual real contractors to do our renovations this time. I've realized that I'm not much of a handyman. I can swing a hammer, I can roll a paintbrush, but sometimes it's just good to hire the pros and bring them in. So that's happening, and I'll probably be doing these videos from my home in probably early May, I'm gonna say. Optimistically, even more optimistically, late April, but we'll see how things go. How about we get on to the questions? So today's question comes from Ania Drozd, and she asks how I created a specific routine to get me going every day. So she says, how did you create did you create a specific routine to get you going every day? How do you start a new project? And then she says, motivation is fickle, and getting started on self-initiated work can be painful. Any tips or tricks? So a lot in there, and I'll just see if I can answer it as quickly or as succinctly as possible. So in terms of routine, yes, I have a routine every day. And it's not a very tight routine, but it's predictable. So essentially, I work 9 to 5. So that means I start around 9 and I end my day around 5. And usually it's actually closer to 5:30, sometimes even quarter to 6. And it's just very important that I set regular hours, especially because I have a family and I need to have a life outside of my work. So that's one reason. Another reason is that most of the world works between 9 and 5. And so I need to be around during typical business hours when emails are coming in and I can respond to them, and phone calls sometimes come in and I have to answer them. So that is the most basic part of my routine. I get up in the morning, I show up at work at 9. I try and fill my 8 hours with productive, meaningful work, and then I go home. I can start earlier, like on Mondays, I usually start a little earlier just to, like right now I'm doing these videos, so I have to wake up a little earlier and come in the studio around 8. But other than that, 5:30 is kind of non-negotiable for me because that's dinner time, and dinner is a very important ritual in our family, and it's important to eat a meal with your family. And so we're trying to set that up as whether you have a routine with work or home, routine is very important. Actually, this might be kind of a tangent, but kids need routine in order to feel stable and safe, in order to thrive. So at home, we actually have a routine that we follow every day from morning until bedtime, and especially bedtime. Our bedtime routine is very predictable. I hope we're not super retentive about our routine, but it is something that our kids can rely on. Imagine so kids have no control over their life or what they're going to do. They're totally relying on their parents to make these decisions for them, especially as they're quite young. So imagine someone pulls you into a van blindfolded, and then you have no idea where you're going, and you show up at some weird school, and then you show up at someone's house, and then maybe you show up at some kind of karate lesson or something. I don't know. It's just like you have no idea what's going to happen, whether it's going to be good or bad, or something you're going to enjoy or not enjoy. Well, that's kind of like what being a kid is like. So if you can set up a routine for your kids that they can predict, they know, oh, okay, we've had breakfast, now I'm going to school. Okay, I'm home from school, now I'm going to have my snack. Now it's playtime. Now I get to watch something on Netflix. Now it's dinner time. Now it's bath time. They can predict and feel secure that the next thing that they predict is going to happen, and that's very important. And so I would extend that to us, even as adults. Having some order in our day gives us predictability, and there's a lot of things that we can't control during the day. We don't know often how our clients are going to receive our work. We don't know what email is going to come in. We don't know what fire we're going to have to put out, or what emergency there will be, or even what the weather will be on Thursday. So these things that we can't control are made more manageable, or we can stomach them better when the things we can't control are in order. And that the thing we can't control is our day, our time, our schedule within reasonable expectations. So that effectively is my routine. Show up at 9 and then work during the day in 5. But within that, I kind of tend to do more stuff for myself in the morning. I'll do self-initiated projects or experiment with some new paintbrushes or new software, and then around close to lunch, I start to kick into work gear. Something changes, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do some work before lunch, and then after lunch, I just keep going. And my most productive hour, unfortunately, is the hour before I have to go home. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I think the last hour, or the last moments, or the last part of time before you know you have to go is going to be the most productive, because suddenly you realize time's up and you get really focused. So for me, that's just before dinner and late at night, because I know partly it's there's no distractions late at night, but so I'm more focused. But it's also, I know that there's going to come the time when I have to go to bed. There's this finality to it, so I just focus more easily on that. So speaking of, okay, so then Tanya asks, how do I start a new project? For the most part, I have a routine that I follow, a process that I follow for every project. And basically, I know exactly how I start a project, how I kind of, what the middle is, and then how I end a project. And over the, I guess, 5 years that I've been illustrating, and then maybe 10 years that I've been designing, I've acquired a process that's very predictable for me. And if you want, I can share it with you guys for what it's worth. So of course, you get a brief from a client. So the first thing you do is make sure that you understand the brief, and you spend this early part of the stage defining the project. How big is the illustration? How many illustrations? What colors do they need? What is the problem you're solving? So you define all those things. So the brief. The second is research and discovery. This is what I call research and discovery. This is where you don't do any creative, but you're researching your topic. You dive deep into whatever the topic is, and you might get, this is actually kind of fun. You know, you can get lost going down the rabbit hole in Wikipedia or watching YouTube videos that help you understand what you're illustrating more. This could last an hour, or it could last a day, sometimes even more. I also start gathering reference images from Google Images. So I look up people or things that I need to illustrate that I may not have in my head, something that I'm able to illustrate just kind of totally from scratch. I need some kind of reference, and that's for most things. So whether it's like I need to draw someone playing soccer, or kids playing a game, or people on a beach, or something like that, right? So you start gathering images. So that's research and discovery. So once research and discovery is done, then it's sketches time. So sketches often starts with, I'll say, goal-free sketching, where I take my images that I've collected as reference images, and I start drawing from them. And I'm not trying to think of a concept or solving the problem. I'm just drawing, like downloading visual information. And the best way to download visual information that you're going to need to draw from your heart later is to just draw it by looking at it. And then maybe I'll put that away I'll do that one day, put it away, wake up the next day, and then start trying concepts. So I'm still in the sketch process, and now I'm sketching my concept. So I'm using the imagery that I have in my head, plus the knowledge I have of the subject, and now I'm trying to make illustrations that are visually interesting, communicate what the illustration is supposed to communicate, and make it look all like an awesome illustration. That's always the goal, is to make something that is a compelling image, right? So once you're done sketches, you might have lots of sketches. I have to do 20 or 30 sketches just to myself, but then I whittle down to three per concept. So if I'm doing 2 illustrations, I may do 2 or 3 illustrations or sketches for each of those illustrations, and I present those to client. And then the client will choose one, and then I will take whatever one they choose for each of those illustrations. I'll take each of those into final art. And final art, of course, is where you make it look like, where you make the actual illustration that will end up in the magazine or the website or on the wall or whatever. And so that's the next stage of my process, is final art. Final art is where you take that sketch and then you build a real illustration over it. And I can get more into these steps and more what I do exactly in those if you guys are interested at some point. I also get quite deep into that process in my Skillshare classes. So you can check out either Inky Illustrations or Inky Maps. Both of those are fairly extensive in showing how I go through my process, minus the client approving things and showing lots of options. Yeah, so that's I start a project by knowing what the first step is. I think that that's where a lot of people get stuck on. Maybe there's 2 things that people get stuck on starting a new project. A, what am I going to illustrate, right? So knowing what you need to draw or do. But probably more importantly is, what is the first step? What first step do you do toward knowing what your illustration will be? So at the outset of any job, hopefully you don't know what your final illustration is going to look like, because what's the fun in illustrating or drawing or creating something if it's already preconceived? For me, the fun is, and also the terror is not knowing what the final illustration is going to look like. So I kind of have to ease myself toward a final idea. Maybe it's, let's call it progressive disclosure. So like every small step that I take opens the door to more revelation about what I'm going to be doing, and open that door, and then I know even more. So in my process, for instance, the brief opens the door to knowing what I'm going to research. Researching and seeing reference images opens the door to knowing what images or what actual visuals I'm going to use, what things I'm going to include, what the content of the illustration will be. And then just sketching those things, my goal-free sketching, will open the door to seeing things that I wouldn't have seen before I started sketching. I like the way that line looked on that bicycle, or I like how these two, whatever, right? Once you put things on paper, you can start to work things out that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So every step along the way kind of opens another door. And one way I like to think of it is like we're tricking ourselves into actually creating an idea. And the only way to trick ourselves is to give ourselves an easy step at first, that makes it hard, that makes it easier, the next step more accessible. It's like stairs, rungs on a ladder. You know, you can't go from the first rung on a ladder to the last. You have to do all the ones in between if you're going to get to the top with any kind of ease or success, right? So motivation is fickle, and getting started on self-initiated work can be painful. So this is specifically now about self-initiated work. So I think it's far easier to do work for a client who's relying on you and is paying you. You have some external motivation to start and finish an illustration. So let's just say you want to do a self-initiated piece. Then suddenly you have nothing but possibility and opportunity. It's pure chaos, because if all there is possibility and opportunity and no constraints, where do you start? I mean, I don't know, let me just think about, like, if I want to go for a run, let's just say I'm traveling, I want to go for a run from my hotel around the city. Um, I don't know the city at all. I don't know the lay of the land. I don't know where the more pedestrian friendly areas are. I don't know where the dangerous areas are. So I need to somehow create a map of where I'm going to run before I take those confident first steps. And once I have a sense of, okay, there's a lake here with a boardwalk, and it's, you know, pedestrian friendly or whatever, suddenly I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go run. I'm going to do a lake run today. It's, you know, or maybe it's, I know there's some hills over here, and it's a nice neighborhood and they have sidewalks. I'm going to go do a hill run over here. So first you need to define what you're going to do. So let's just say for a self-initiated work, you want to create a printed poster. You're going to sell it on one of those online services where people, your customers and fans can order prints of your work. So then you define the format. I'm going to do an 18 by 24 inch poster, right? Suddenly you have at least the format. The next thing is maybe you say, I want to do this in 3 colors only. I want to, so maybe you define how many colors you're going to work in, depending on your style, right? Maybe you're a pencil artist, maybe you just do drawing, and that's your constraint. You know it's just going to be graphite, black and white. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is come up with a theme. Maybe you feel pressure to do something that's going to solve a problem or make a difference or something like that. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to do something that you know, tackles a big issue. So then think of maybe an organization that you can get behind, or something like that. Or maybe do away with that pressure of making something meaningful and just do something that you like. Okay, give yourself permission to do something that you want to do. If you're making something because you think you should do it, that's probably not going to be as life-giving to you and as joyful as something that is more just because you want to. So maybe you want to make a travel poster because you love travel, and you know, maybe you dream of traveling to some places but you can't yet. One way of experiencing travel is to vicariously travel through illustration. You know, start gathering images of, like, I'd love to go to Venice, for instance. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So maybe I would go and start researching about Venice and finding all the cool places in it. And maybe I was like, oh, I should make a map of Venice, because that way I can, like, figure out all the places I want to go when I eventually do go to Venice, hoping that it's not totally flooded due to climate change. Anyway, that's sad. I don't want to think about that right now. So so suddenly, oh, I'm making a map. Okay. And now I know it's about Florence. And suddenly all the pieces come together. So give yourself, you know, be patient with yourself. Be okay with the fact that at first it's going to be chaos and you don't know anything about what you're going to do. It's all unexplored territory. The next thing you want to do is start imposing your own constraints on the project, imposing your own order on this thing you're about to create. Because until you do that, you're not gonna know where to start, and you're not gonna know where to go. And so self-initiated work is really hard to start in that sense. It's also hard to keep going, especially in the middle of the project when you keep getting stuck. And you will get stuck on almost every illustration project. If you're new to illustration, if you're like me, and probably most people, you will always get stuck at some point in the middle of your project, and it will be discouraging and you'll feel like giving up. At that point, put it down, do something else, go to bed, wake up, come at it with a new mind. You might maybe, I just find that when I put something away, like, I just know when I'm done trying to think of something, I need to put it away and I'll pick it up the next day, and it will I'll be able to look at it with new eyes. And so that's one way of overcoming that hard part in the middle where you don't know where to go next. The other thing is you sometimes just have to push through. So you can either despair and give up, which with self-initiated projects, quite frankly, it's very easy to do because no one cares. No one cares but you. And so you just need to push through. But one way of making it easier to push through and harder to give up on yourself is making sure that other people do care. So make yourself accountable. Because there's no external motivation like a paying client for self-initiated projects, you have to create artificial external motivation. So tell other people on Instagram or wherever, tell your friends, say, I'm going to make this poster about, I'm going to make this big poster map of Venice, and or whatever it is, and then suddenly your mind is aware of the fact that other people know you're doing this, and it's just a little bit extra kick in the pants to keep going. Another thing you could do is join some kind of community or some kind of initiative. For instance, the 100-Day Project, which Andy J. Pizza talks about on his Creative Pep Talk podcast, I think his last episode at the time of this recording. He was talking about how he's going to be doing the 100-Day Project with his listenership. So I think if you just look up 100-Day Project on Google, or it's a hashtag as well, this is where you spend 100 days doing one thing over and over and over again. And it's a great way of building content for your Instagram feed or for your portfolio. And it's also just, you don't even have to show it. It could just be something you do in your sketchbook. But having that external community in it with you will motivate you. So external motivation is key. Having a sense of direction is key. And having something that you really want to do, something that you're excited to wake up for and do, will be really motivating for you. But I think the hardest part is that there will be discouragement, and there will be a point where you feel stuck, and at that point you just have to push through and believe you're going to do it. There have been countless times where I'm like, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. But if I despaired and said I can't do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to go to bed and call the client and apologize and say I can't do this, that would be the end of me. I have done that a few times in my life, but only when I knew beyond a shadow of reasonable doubt that I just knew that I couldn't do it, for whatever reason. But I have felt like doing that probably for 50% of my jobs or more. And if I did that every time I felt that way, if I gave up every time I felt like I got stuck, I wouldn't be an illustrator today. So you kind of have to trick yourself in, you have to believe you're going to do it. And maybe there's more to this that I'll have to talk about another time, because maybe it's not enough just to say believe you'll do it. But let me just say that when I'm making something in sketch phase, it's hard to even see what the value of the sketch is. And sometimes I just have to say, this is the best I can do. These are the sketches I have. This is what came out of me. I can't do anything else. I've spent enough time. Sometimes I'll just take my best of those, however they are, and I'll send them to the client, and they'll pick them, or they may give feedback. And that will just give me the clues for the next step, whatever their feedback. If they love it, then I know that I'm just going to create the final for it. Or if they don't like it, their feedback is going to give me more ideas for how to improve on the sketches, or what to do for the next sketches. So it's just another one of those moments where it opens a gate into more knowledge and more creation of, or a solution of the problem, more solving the problem. So yeah, sometimes it just takes some humility and saying, okay, this is what I have, and I'm I'm just going to go with that. But oftentimes, regardless of whether your client loved the sketch or asked for changes, but you didn't feel super awesome about it, once you start creating that final art where you add the color and, you know, whatever it is that you bring to the process, you bring that to the sketch, you start saying, oh yeah, this is good. You start adding layers and textures, and the colors start interacting with each other. You start believing it. Sometimes it, like if you're making a print, take your process work, like mid-process, and put it in a mock-up frame, just to envision it on a wall in someone's house, right? So go to a mock-up image site where you can put in Photoshop, you can like take your print or your image and you put it in that fake frame and it's on someone else's wall with a cool couch or whatever, you know. Or if you're making a package for like a label for a beer bottle, you can get a mock-up beer bottle and put it on. You start to see it in a more realized environment, and that can be motivating. And so what I like to say is, in these moments, the transition from like sketch to final, or I'm not sure how this is going to be, to like, oh wow, I'm really liking it, I really see it now. It's like it turns from something you can't believe in into something unbelievable. And I'm not saying that you know, I'm not saying like think of yourself as the most phenomenal illustrator ever, but it is literally unbelievable that this final thing that you created out of nothing could have been made at all, right? So if I look at a lot of my work, I'm like, how did I think about that? And I'm not saying I'm phenomenal. I'm just saying I started somewhere and I ended up here through a process, one door opening to the next, And if I were to have looked from the very first moment of that project forward, I wouldn't have believed that I could have gotten there. But of course, when you're building something, one brick gets put over the other. So that's my thought about routine and starting on projects and doing self-initiated projects. And within there, the trick is teasing ourselves from a lower point to a higher point. So thank you so much, Ania, for your question. I really enjoyed answering it, and I hope that helps a lot of you guys out there. So thanks so much, guys, for watching me, listening to me, whatever you're doing. Let me know your questions, and I'll be listing them here and answering them as I can. My name is Tom Froese. You can find me online at tomfroese.com, and my Instagram is Mr. Tom Froese, and my Twitter is @TomFroese. And of course, I have Skillshare classes, and the links are here with the video. All right, guys, have a great week. Bye.